There's a place on Earth where you can drive for hours without seeing another person. But the penguin population is bigger than most cities. But the human population, just a handful. Where giant mountains rise so high, their peaks disappear into the clouds above. Where the massive glaciers crack and tumble into beautiful blue lakes right before your eyes. This place exists. Welcome to Patagonia. Patagonia. Even the name sounds like something from another world, doesn't it? Stretching across more than 400,000 square miles at the southern tip of South America, this massive region is shared between two countries, Argentina and Chile. But here's what makes Patagonia truly special. Despite its enormous size, fewer people live here than in many single cities around the world. What draws people to this remote corner of the Earth? Is it a challenge? The beauty? Or perhaps something deeper? A need to stand in a place where nature still rules absolutely, where humans are just visitors, and where the world feels exactly as it did thousands of years ago. Our journey begins at the very bottom of this incredible region, in a place that proudly calls itself the end of the world. As we travel south, civilization slowly fades away. The roads become narrower, towns grow smaller. And then, nestled between snow-capped mountains and a cold channel of water, we arrive at Ushuaia. Real quick pause before we dive in. If you're excited about this journey, hit that like and subscribe button. It helps more people discover these incredible places. All right, let's go to Ushuaia. Ushuaia holds a unique title: the southernmost city in the world. Standing here, there's nothing between you and Antarctica except 600 miles of the roughest ocean on the planet. The city clings to the edge of Tierra del Fuego, which means land of fire. A name that seems almost ironic when you're standing in freezing wind, watching snow fall in summer. But why Land of Fire? The story goes back to 1520, when Ferdinand Magellan's ships sailed through these waters. His crew saw countless fires burning along the shores. Bonfires lit by the indigenous Yagan people who had lived here for thousands of years. These fires glowed in the mist like stars fallen to earth. And the Spanish sailors were both fascinated and terrified. Ushuaia's own story is equally fascinating. In the late 1800s, British missionaries arrived and built a small outpost among the Yagan people. But the city's real growth came from something far darker. The Argentine government decided to build a prison here, their version of Siberia. The logic was brutal but simple. Send criminals so far south that escape becomes impossible. And they were right. The prisoners who arrived here found themselves trapped not by walls, but by nature itself. The cold, the forest, the endless distance, all of it formed an invisible prison. These convicts were forced to cut timber and build infrastructure. And ironically, they ended up creating the very city that would eventually thrive here. Today, that old prison is a museum. And Ushuaia has transformed from a place of punishment into a destination of wonder. But walk through its streets on a winter evening when the sun sets at 4 p.m. when the wind howls through the buildings and you can still feel echoes of that harsh past. From the city's waterfront, we can see the Beagle Channel stretching before us. Named after the ship that carried Charles Darwin through these waters in the 1830s. This channel is more than just water. It's a liquid highway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. A 150-mile passage through one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. Stepping onto a small boat in Ushuaia's harbour, we begin our journey along the Beagle Channel. The air is crisp and cold, carrying the smell of salt and kelp. As we move away from the city, the sounds of civilization fade, replaced by the cry of seabirds and the gentle splash of waves against our hull. The channel reveals its treasures slowly. Small rocky islands appear, crowded with sea lions whose barking echoes across the water. These animals seem completely unbothered by our presence, going about their daily routines of fighting, sunbathing, and fishing as if we don't exist. In the middle of the channel, about 5 nautical miles from Ushuaia, stands Les Éclaireurs Lighthouse. With its distinctive red and white stripes, this lonely beacon has guided ships since 1920. Many people call it the lighthouse at the end of the world, though that title actually belongs to another lighthouse much farther east. Still, standing on a tiny rocky outcrop in the middle of this vast waterway, it certainly feels like the end of something. As we continue east, the landscape changes. The protected waters give way to rougher seas, and in the distance, the dark silhouette of Cape Horn rises from the waves. This is one of the most feared spots on any sailor's map. The meeting point of the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans creates conditions so dangerous that thousands of ships have been lost here over the centuries. But amidst all this wildness, there's something wonderfully unexpected. Martillo Island appears ahead, and as we approach, we start to see movement on the shore. Thousands of black and white shapes waddle across the beach, diving into the water, calling to each other. Penguins, thousands of them. Every October, when spring arrives in the southern hemisphere, Magellanic penguins return to Martillo Island to nest and raise their young. Around 3,000 breeding pairs make this island their home, creating one of the most charming wildlife spectacles in Patagonia. Walking among them, yes, you can actually walk near these colonies, feels surreal. They're curious, unafraid, going about their penguin business while occasionally stopping to stare at the strange, tall creatures with cameras. In recent years, something even more special has started happening here. King penguins, those taller, more colourful cousins with bright orange markings on their necks, have begun appearing on Martillo Island. They're far from their usual Antarctic homes, possibly driven north by changing ocean currents and warming waters. Leaving the islands behind, we turn our boat back toward the mainland. The Beagle Channel has shown us one face of Patagonia, the maritime island world where water and ice shape everything. But now, it's time to explore another Patagonia entirely. As we head back to Ushuaia and then travel north into the heart of Tierra del Fuego, the landscape transforms. Dense forests of lenga trees appear, their twisted trunks shaped by constant wind. These are the southernmost forests in the world, and hiking through them feels like entering a fairy tale. Moss covers everything. Streams bubble over ancient rocks, and the light filters through the canopy in soft green rays. Following a narrow trail through this enchanted forest, we're heading towards something special. The path is muddy, sometimes challenging, but every step takes us deeper into wilderness. And then, suddenly, the trees open up, and we see it. Laguna Esmeralda. The name means Emerald Lagoon, and the moment you see it, you understand why. The water glows with a color so intense, so impossibly vibrant, it almost looks artificial. It's not just green or blue, it's something in between. A shade of turquoise that seems to glow from within. This color comes from glacial flour. Tiny particles of rock ground up by glaciers and suspended in the water. When sunlight hits these particles, they scatter light in a way that creates this electric, otherworldly hue. At the far end of the lake, the Ojo del Albino Glacier descends between two cliffs, slowly feeding the lagoon with meltwater year-round. Standing here, surrounded by snow-capped peaks, with this impossible color before you, you realize something important about Patagonia. This isn't a place you just look at. It's a place that looks back at you, that changes something inside you. The raw beauty here doesn't ask for anything. It simply exists, indifferent to whether anyone sees it or not. From Tierra del Fuego, our journey takes us across one of history's most famous waterways, the Strait of Magellan. This narrow, twisting passage between the mainland and Tierra del Fuego was once the most important shipping route in the world. Imagine it's 1520. You're on Ferdinand Magellan's ship, having sailed from Spain months ago. You've survived storms, near mutinies, and dwindling supplies. And now you're trying to find a way through this maze of channels, with no maps, no GPS, just courage and determination. Magellan spent 38 days threading through these waters, never knowing if he'd find a way through or hit a dead end. The strait is still challenging today, even with modern navigation. Shifting currents, strong winds, and sudden fog can appear in minutes, erasing the horizon and turning the water into a grey void. Yet cargo ships, research vessels, and cruise liners still use this route, following in the wake of those early explorers. On the Chilean side of the strait sits Punta Arenas, a city that grew up serving ships that passed through. Walking through its streets, you can feel the history. Old buildings that once housed ship chandlers and hotels for sailors. Monuments to those who never made it through the treacherous waters. But we're here for something else. About 20 miles northeast of Punta Arenas, in the middle of the strait, lies Isla Magdalena. And this small island hosts something extraordinary. As our boat approaches, we start to see them. Not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of thousands of Magellanic penguins, covering the island like a living carpet. If Martillo Island was a family gathering, Isla Magdalena is a full-blown metropolis. More than 60,000 breeding pairs call this island home during the summer months. The noise hits you first. A constant chatter of calls, barks, and whistles as penguins communicate with each other. Then comes the smell. Well, 120,000 penguins create quite a lot of, let's say, natural waste. But none of that matters when you're walking along the marked trail, completely surrounded by these incredible birds. They're everywhere, crossing the path in front of you, popping out of burrows, arguing with neighbors, carefully tending their eggs. Some waddle down to the beach, forming little groups before diving into the water with surprising grace. Others come back from fishing trips, their bellies full, calling out to find their mates among the thousands. What makes this scene even more special is that these penguins aren't here by accident. They choose to return to this specific island year after year, sometimes traveling thousands of miles to get here. How they navigate back to the exact same burrow they used the year before, we still don't fully understand. It's one of nature's many mysteries. Leaving the strait behind, we continue north along Chile's coast until we reach Puerto Natales, a small port town surrounded by mountains. The name Puerto Natales sits on the shores of the Last Hope Sound, a name given by a Spanish explorer who had nearly run out of supplies and luck while searching for a passage north. He didn't find it, but the name stuck perfectly for this remote outpost. Puerto Natales serves as the gateway to one of South America's most iconic wilderness areas, Torres del Paine National Park. As we leave town, paved roads fade into gravel and civilization slowly disappears behind us. The approach to Torres del Paine is an experience in itself. The landscape opens up into something that feels primordial. Endless grasslands stretch toward jagged peaks that look like they were carved by giants. The sky seems bigger here. Clouds move faster, and the wind, well, the wind is constant, powerful, sometimes strong enough to literally push you sideways. And then, as we round a bend, we see them. The Torres, 3 massive granite towers rising straight up from the earth, piercing the sky like the fingers of some buried god trying to break through. These spires reach over 9,000 feet high, and they dominate the landscape in a way that's hard to describe. They're not just mountains. They're monuments. The Torres del Paine were formed over 12 million years by a combination of tectonic forces and glacial erosion. Hot magma pushed up through the earth, cooling into solid granite underground. Then, over millions of years, glaciers carved away the softer rock around them, revealing these incredible pillars. Nearby stand the Cuernos del Paine, or Horns of Paine. These peaks are different from the Torres. They have dark sedimentary caps sitting on pale granite bases, creating a two-toned effect that looks almost painted on. The contrast between the dark upper sections and light lower sections shows the geological layering that makes this mountain range unique. But Torres del Paine isn't just about peaks. The park contains a complete wilderness ecosystem. Turquoise lakes reflect the mountains on calm days. Rivers rush through valleys fed by melting glaciers. Hardy grasses bend in the wind across open pampa. And everywhere you might spot guanacos, those elegant, camel-like creatures that are distant relatives of llamas. The weather here changes with stunning speed. One moment you're walking under blue skies. The next you're sheltering from horizontal rain. An hour later, the sun breaks through again. And suddenly there's a rainbow arching over the Torres. This volatility isn't a bug. It's a feature, It's part of what makes Torres del Paine feel so alive, so unpredictable. Many visitors come here for the hiking. The W Trek, named after the shape of the route on a map, takes you through some of the park's most spectacular scenery over several days. But even if you're not a hardcore hiker, just being in this landscape, seeing these formations, breathing this air, it changes you somehow. Before we leave Chilean Patagonia, there's one more stop we need to make. Hidden among wind-carved hills at the foot of the mountains lies one of Patagonia's strangest and most evocative places, the cave of the Mylodon. This massive cave became famous in 1895, when a local settler discovered something extraordinary. A piece of strange, furry hide preserved by the cold, dry air of the cave. At first, no one knew what it was. But when scientists examined it, they realized they were holding the skin of a creature that had been extinct for 10,000 years. A giant ground sloth called the Mylodon. Try to picture this animal. It was about the size of a small car, covered in thick fur with pieces of bone embedded in its skin like natural armor. It walked on its hind legs and used massive claws to strip bark from trees and dig for roots. And it lived here in this very cave at the same time as the earliest humans in Patagonia. For a brief moment after the discovery, scientists actually wondered if these creatures might still be alive somewhere in Patagonia's remote valleys. Expeditions were organized, stories were told. But eventually, reality set in. The Mylodon was gone, vanished at the end of the last ice age. Still, standing in this cave, which could easily hold several houses inside it, you can almost imagine those ancient giants shuffling around in the darkness. The cave has yielded not just Mylodon remains, but also evidence of early human presence. Tools, bones from their meals, signs of fires. This was a place where two worlds overlapped: the ancient world of megafauna and the newer world of human hunters. From here, our route turns east, crossing back into Argentina. The landscape shifts dramatically as we leave the mountains behind. The dense forests and dramatic peaks give way to something completely different: the vast, open expanse of the Patagonian steppe. This is a land of subtler beauties. Endless grasslands, salt lakes that shimmer in the distance, occasional herds of guanacos moving across the horizon. The sky dominates everything here, stretching from edge to edge of your vision. During the day, it's an intense blue. At night, with virtually no light pollution, the stars appear so thick, they look like someone spilled milk across the darkness. This steppe continues for hundreds of miles, and driving through it, you understand why early explorers found Patagonia so daunting. There's nowhere to hide here. No shelter from the wind, just openness that seems to go on forever. After hours crossing the steppe, signs of civilization begin to reappear. Small estancias, sheep ranches, dot the landscape. And then, sitting on the edge of a massive turquoise lake, we find El Calafate. This town, named after a thorny Patagonian bush that produces sweet berries, has become the tourism capital of Argentine Patagonia. The legend says that anyone who eats the Calafate berry is destined to return to Patagonia. Looking around at the landscape, it's easy to believe that legend might be true. El Calafate serves one main purpose: to provide access to one of the world's most spectacular natural wonders. Just 50 miles from town, approached by a road that winds through forests and offers tantalizing glimpses through the trees, lies the Perito Moreno Glacier. Nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for your first view of this glacier. You round a bend on the viewing platform, and suddenly, there it is. A wall of ice stretching almost 2 miles wide and rising 200 feet above the water. But these numbers don't capture it. The scale is incomprehensible until you're standing there, dwarfed by this frozen giant. The ice is impossibly blue. Not the pale blue of a painted wall, but a deep electric blue that seems to glow from within. This color comes from the way ancient, compacted ice absorbs and reflects light. The denser the ice, the bluer it appears. And the ice, in Perito Moreno, has been compacting for hundreds of years. But Perito Moreno isn't just beautiful. It's alive. Unlike most glaciers around the world, which are retreating due to climate change, Perito Moreno is in equilibrium. It advances and retreats in a natural cycle that's been going on for centuries. And it does this in the most dramatic way possible. As you stand on the viewing platform, you hear it. Deep groans and cracks that sound like thunder. The glacier is moving, constantly shifting. And every few minutes, sometimes every few seconds, chunks of ice break off and crash into the water below. When a large piece carves off, it's spectacular. First, you hear a crack that echoes across the valley. Then you see the ice shift, tilt forward. And suddenly, an entire tower of ice the size of a building collapses into Lago Argentino, with a splash that sends waves rushing toward shore. The sound arrives a moment later, a boom that you feel in your chest. Watching this happen over and over, you realize you're witnessing something ancient and powerful. This ice fell as snow hundreds of years ago, maybe during the time of Shakespeare or Leonardo da Vinci. It's been slowly flowing down from the mountains ever since, and now, in a matter of seconds, it returns to the lake. The glacier creates its own weather system. Cold air rolling off the ice meets warmer air from the lake, creating winds and clouds that swirl around the viewing area. Sometimes rain falls on one end of the platform, while the sun shines on the other. People stand here for hours, mesmerized. Some are silent, simply watching. Others cry. There's something about this place that brings out deep emotions. Maybe it's the raw power of nature. Or maybe it's realizing how small we are in comparison to geological timescales. Perito Moreno is named after Francisco Moreno, an Argentine explorer who traveled through Patagonia in the late 1800s, mapping and documenting regions that were virtually unknown at the time. He would be amazed to see how this glacier has become one of Argentina's most visited natural wonders. A few hours north of El Calafate, the landscape begins to change again. The flat steppe gives way to rolling hills, then foothills, and finally, towering peaks appear on the horizon. We're approaching Argentina's trekking capital, El Chaltén. This tiny village didn't even exist until 1985. It was created during a border dispute with Chile, when Argentina decided to establish a permanent settlement in this strategic location. Today, El Chaltén has a population of only about 350 permanent residents. But during the summer trekking season, thousands of visitors swell that number. The village itself is charming in its simplicity. Unpaved streets, small hotels, gear shops, and restaurants serving hearty meals to hungry hikers. But no one comes here for the village. They come for what rises behind it. Mount Fitz Roy, or as the indigenous Tehuelche people called it, Chaltén, the smoking mountain. The name comes from the fact that the peak is so often wrapped in clouds that it looks like it's emitting smoke. Standing at over 11,000 feet, Fitz Roy isn't the tallest mountain in the Andes, but few peaks command the same reverence among climbers and hikers. The mountain's shape is what makes it special. It's not a simple cone like many volcanoes. Instead, Fitz Roy is a vertical tower of granite, with faces so steep they're almost vertical. When sunlight hits the mountain at dawn, the granite glows orange and red. Alpenglow, climbers call it, creating one of the most photographed moments in all of Patagonia. The main hiking trail to Laguna de los Tres, the lake at Fitz Roy's base, starts right from El Chaltén. It's a 12-mile round trip that takes most people 8 to 10 hours. The trail winds through lenga forests, crosses streams, and gradually ascends toward the mountains. The final ascent to the viewpoint is steep and challenging. Your legs burn. Your lungs work hard in the thin air. And you wonder if it's worth it. And then you reach the top of the ridge, and all doubt vanishes. Laguna de los Tres spreads out below you, a turquoise jewel of glacial water. And rising directly behind it, so close you feel you could reach out and touch it, is Fitz Roy. The mountain towers above everything, its granite faces catching the light, with smaller peaks like Cerro Poinçonneau and Guillaume, flanking it on either side. People arrive at this viewpoint and just sit, sometimes for hours. The wind howls, clouds race across the sky, and the mountain presides over everything like a silent witness to millions of years of geological time. What makes Fitz Roy even more special is its reputation among climbers. This mountain doesn't give itself up easily. The weather window for climbing is incredibly short, just a few months in summer. Even then, storms can arrive with stunning speed, pinning climbers to the wall for days. The first successful ascent wasn't until 1952, by a French team. And even today, with modern equipment, climbing Fitz Roy remains one of mountaineering's greatest challenges. Standing at Laguna de los Tres, watching clouds dance around the peak, you understand why this place draws people from around the world. It's not just about conquering mountains or taking Instagram photos. It's about standing in the presence of something that reminds you how vast and ancient and indifferent nature really is. From the dramatic peaks of El Chaltén, our journey continues north into what's known as the Lake District, a region where Patagonia transitions from harsh wilderness into something softer, more welcoming, but no less beautiful. The landscape here was shaped by glaciers during the last ice age. As these massive rivers of ice retreated, they left behind deep valleys that filled with water, creating a chain of stunning lakes connected by rivers and surrounded by forests. One of these jewels is Lake Nahuelhuapi, the heart of Argentina's Lake District. The name comes from the Mapuche language and means Island of the Puma. This enormous lake stretches over 200 square miles, its blue waters reaching depths of almost 1,500 feet in places. But Nahuelhuapi holds more than just stunning scenery. It's famous for a legend. Nahuelito, Patagonia's version of the Loch Ness Monster. Stories of a serpent-like creature living in the lake's depths go back centuries to indigenous Mapuche tales. Even today, locals tell stories with knowing smiles, always leaving room for mystery. On the lake's shore sits San Carlos de Bariloche, usually just called Bariloche. This is the Switzerland of South America, a town of chocolate shops, Alpine-style architecture, and stunning mountain views. Founded by German and Austrian immigrants in the early 1900s, Bariloche retains that European influence in its buildings, its food, and its culture. The town sprawls along the lakeshore, with the Andes rising dramatically behind it. In winter, nearby ski resorts fill with snow enthusiasts. In summer, the focus shifts to hiking, biking, and water sports on the pristine lake. Just outside Bariloche, a scenic route called the Circuito Chico offers one of Argentina's most beautiful drives. This 37-mile loop winds along the lakeshore, climbs into the hills, and passes viewpoints that offer 360-degree panoramas of lakes and snow-capped peaks, stretching all the way to Chile. Along this route, you'll find Hotel Lau Lau, a grand Patagonian lodge built in the 1940s using local stone and timber. Its design became the template for mountain architecture across the Andes. Massive timbers, stone fireplaces, and floor-to-ceiling windows that bring the landscape inside. Continuing north from Bariloche, we follow the famous Route of the Seven Lakes. Despite its name, there are actually more than 7 lakes along this stunning road. The name is more poetry than accuracy. Each lake has its own character. Some are deep blue, others turquoise, depending on their depth and what minerals they contain. Dense forests of coihu and arayan trees line the shores, and in many places, the road runs right along the water's edge, offering views that make drivers constantly pull over to take photos. The route follows an ancient path once used by Mapuche communities, moving between valleys. Today, it's become one of South America's most celebrated scenic drives, a pilgrimage for travelers seeking natural beauty. The northern end of this route brings us to San Martín de los Andes, another charming mountain town on the shores of Laca Lake. Smaller and quieter than Bariloche, San Martín de los Andes maintains a more intimate, alpine village atmosphere. The lake itself is remarkable. Its waters are so clear that from a boat, you can see straight down to submerged branches of fallen trees. The lake drains westward through the Huahum River, eventually crossing into Chile. This unusual geography made it a key route for trade and communication long before any roads existed. Rising above everything in this region is Lagoon volcano, the sacred mountain of northern Patagonia. This perfect cone soars over 12,000 feet, its symmetrical shape visible from miles away in any direction. To the indigenous Mapuche people, Lanín is more than just a mountain. It's home to the Palan, the guardian spirit of the natural world. Lanín gives its name to the national park that surrounds it, a vast wilderness protecting over 1 million acres. Established in 1937, it was one of Argentina's earliest national parks, created not just to preserve nature, but to protect cultural identity and territory. The park contains something extraordinary: forests of Araucaria araucana, the monkey puzzle tree. These ancient evergreens have existed since the age of dinosaurs, looking like something from a prehistoric world, with their sharp, scale-like leaves spiraling around thick branches. They can grow over 150 feet tall and live for more than 1,000 years. Walking through an Araucaria forest feels like entering a different time. These trees were here when mastodons roamed South America. They survived the end of the Ice Age, the rise and fall of indigenous empires, and the arrival of European colonizers. And they're still here, silent witnesses to an unfathomable span of time. The Andes don't really divide Argentina and Chile in this region. They connect them. The mountains are lower here than farther south, and several passes allow relatively easy crossing between the two countries. The landscapes on both sides share similar character: deep lakes, dense forests, volcanic peaks. On the Chilean side, we find Puerto Varas, one of the most picturesque towns in Chile's Lake District. Like Bariloche, it was founded by German settlers in the mid-1800s, and their influence is still visible in the steep-roofed wooden houses and immaculately maintained gardens. Puerto Varas sits on the shore of Lake Lancahue, Chile's second-largest lake, and dominating the view across the water is one of the most perfectly symmetrical mountains you'll ever see: Osorno volcano. Osorno rises to 8,700 feet in a flawless cone of snow and rock. It's so perfectly shaped it almost looks artificial, like someone drew an idealized volcano and then somehow made it real. This symmetry comes from thousands of years of regular eruptions that built up the cone layer by layer. Despite its peaceful appearance, Osorno is very much an active volcano. It has erupted more than 10 times in the past 200 years, though not recently. The locals live with this knowledge, aware that the beautiful mountain they see every morning could one day wake up. At Osorno's foot, the Petrohue River carries turquoise glacial water through hardened lava flows. Over time, this water has carved the rock into smooth, otherworldly shapes. The result is the Petrohue waterfalls. Not a single massive drop, but a series of rapids and cascades that rush through the volcanic channels. The turquoise water contrasting dramatically with the black basalt. Further north in Chile's Lake District lies another unique place: Chiloé Island. This is where Patagonia starts to transition into something else. The climate becomes wetter, the vegetation more lush, and the culture distinctly maritime. Chiloé has its own identity, separate from mainland Chile. The island was home to indigenous Chono and Willy people for thousands of years before Spanish colonization. When the Spanish arrived, they built churches throughout the island, more than 60 wooden churches. each one unique, many now UNESCO World Heritage Sites. But Chiloé's most iconic image is the palafitos, stilt houses built by fishermen along the shoreline. These colorful structures stand on wooden stilts over the water, designed to rise and fall with the dramatic tides. At high tide, they seem to float. At low tide, they stand exposed, revealing the mudflats below. Many palafitos date back over a century, built by fishermen who needed to live close to their boats and the sea that sustained them. Today, some still serve their original purpose, while others have been converted into guest houses, restaurants, and art studios. Walking along Chiloé's shores, you're walking through a culture that has survived by adapting to the sea's rhythms. The island's identity is tied to fishing, to boats, to the constant movement of tides that dictate daily life. Before we end our journey, there are a few more wonders of Patagonia we need to experience. These are places that don't fit easily into a north-south narrative, but they're essential to understanding what makes this region so extraordinary. Hidden in Argentina's remote interior, where forests fade into volcanic plateaus, lies Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of Hands. This archaeological site contains some of the oldest human expressions in South America, dating back more than 9,000 years. The cave walls are covered with hundreds of hand stencils, red, white, black, and ochre. Ancient people placed their hands against the rock and blew pigment around them, leaving behind negative images that have survived for millennia. Most of these hands belong to adolescents or women. They're small, delicate, each one unique. Looking at them, you realize you're seeing something profoundly human. A message that says, "I was here, I existed." It's the same impulse that makes us take photographs or write our names. But these hands have been on this wall for 9,000 years, outlasting the civilizations that created them. Crossing back into Chile, we encounter one of Patagonia's most extraordinary natural phenomena: the Marble Caves. Located on General Carrera Lake, these formations are the result of 6,000 years of water erosion on calcium carbonate rock. The caves are only accessible by boat or kayak, and approaching them is like entering a dream. The lake water is incredibly blue, that distinctive glacial turquoise, and it reflects onto the smooth marble walls, making everything glow. The walls are striped with swirls of white, grey, and blue, polished to a mirror-like finish by millennia of water. Inside the caves, you float through smooth corridors and domed chambers. With water so clear, you can see straight to the bottom. The reflections of the blue marble in the water create the illusion of infinite space, like you're suspended in a blue sphere. The colors and shapes change throughout the year as water levels rise and fall, revealing new patterns and hiding others. Every visit offers a different experience, a different cave in some sense. Finally, we need to talk about the wind. Throughout this journey, we've mentioned the Patagonian wind, but until you've experienced it, it's hard to understand. Patagonia is one of the windiest places on Earth. The region sits in the path of the westerlies, strong winds that circle the southern hemisphere almost unimpeded by land. When these winds hit the Andes, they accelerate, creating gusts that can exceed 100 miles per hour. This wind shapes everything. Trees grow permanently bent toward the east. Buildings are built low and strong. Hikers learn to lean into the wind, to use it for balance. Sometimes it's so strong you literally can't walk against it. You have to wait for it to ease. But here's what's interesting. After a few days in Patagonia, you stop noticing the wind as an annoyance. It becomes part of the landscape, as fundamental as the mountains or the lakes. The silence that follows when the wind stops feels strange, wrong somehow. You realize the wind is Patagonia's voice, and it never stops speaking. Thanks for joining this journey to Patagonia. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe for more adventures. And tell me in the comments, glaciers or penguins? What excites you more? See you soon.